In this video, I'm going to talk you through what gravel bike suspension is for and why you might want it. But before we start, I suspect a few of you are probably feeling a little bit angry. You've clicked on the video, but you've already made up your minds. And believe me, I know how you're feeling. A couple of years ago, that was me too. If you want suspension on a bike, you buy a mountain bike. However, over the last 2 or 3 years, I've ridden more gravel in different weather and in different parts of the world and on different bikes. And so I'm now a little bit more open-minded. I don't have an agenda here though, so these are just going to be the facts and I'll let you make up your own minds. Now I'm going to be using a Cannondale Topstone Carbon Lefty to demonstrate here. And to be clear, Cannondale have helped to fund the creation of this video. But before you say, well, this is just an ad, bear in mind that Cannondale make rigid gravel bikes as well as full suspension gravel bikes, and they're famous for their mountain bikes. So they don't really mind whether the answer to this question is yes or no. So for better or worse, these are my words, as in fact they always are. Firstly though, it sounds like a simple question, but what is suspension actually for? Well, 2 things. It enhances your control of the bike by maximising the grip of your tyres, keeping the rubber in contact with the ground for more of the time. And secondly, it improves your comfort as it limits the impacts to you, the rider, from the road or trail. You always have suspension on your bike thanks to your tyres, but with mechanical suspension, you take it several steps further on. So with this 47mm wide tyre, you can see you've probably got about 30mm of travel before the ground would hit the rim. With this Lefty Oliver fork, you've then got an additional 30mm. However, the 2 things are not the same at all. I mean, this is a tyre. It does many things. This exists specifically for the purpose of suspension, and it's been tuned for gravel riding. What with its combination of air spring and oil damper. And it means that it's not overactive on small bumps, so that it doesn't bob when you're pedaling and it doesn't generally feel soft, but instead it's responsive to mid-sized bumps, but it still doesn't blow through all its travel really easily when you hit big stuff. It's really clever. The rear suspension on this bike, meanwhile, is slightly different. It doesn't have dampers, but instead relies on tuned flex in the carbon to provide 30mm of suspension. Now, it's not super active over small stuff again. Instead, it takes the edge off those medium and bigger hits. From a comfort perspective, the lower pressures that you can run in wider gravel tyres, and particularly these even wider 650B tyres, absorbs that sort of high frequency road and trail buzz. Where the suspension then kicks in is on medium sized bumps like those stutter bumps or braking bumps that litter gravel roads, or the technical stuff when you're venturing properly off-road like rocks or roots. Now that basically means that the suspension sort of stops the full force of the impact being transmitted from the bike into your hands and your arms and your backside. So it stops you getting quite so fatigued from riding over bumps, but then it also means you can actually go faster for the same effort because your forward momentum isn't constantly being impeded by the energy required to bounce you up and down over bumps. From a control perspective, the suspension prevents your wheels from bouncing off bumps quite so much, so that your tyre stays in contact with the ground for more of the time. Now, ultimately, this means that when you want to get the power down by pedalling or corner or braking, you have lots more traction. Now, you can see you can carry way more speed as a result through bumpy sections, but you can also tailor your tyre choices. You could run slicker, faster rolling tyres, but still have similar levels of grip to before. Suspension first started to appear on bikes in the late 80s, as more and more people realised that if you want to ride a bike off-road, it really helps to enhance the experience for the exact reasons that I've just described. And now, in fact, it's pretty difficult to even buy a mountain bike without at least front suspension on it. The question is then, are gravel bikes at the beginning of this same journey? And therefore, if that's the case, would you not be better off just skipping the last 30 years of sometimes painful technological progress and just buying a mountain bike? That's a really common question. In my opinion, despite similarities like grippier tyres and in this case suspension, the two types of bikes are really different. Fundamentally, for me, a gravel bike still has to feel nimble and fast on tarmac, and you still have to be able to get your optimal position on the bike, not one that's been dictated by 100mm of suspension that puts your handlebars at the same height as your saddle. Now, yes, you can of course use a mountain bike on pavement, of course you can, but with a gravel bike, it makes riding on pavement actually fun. Now, part of that is down to the narrower drop handlebars that make you, whisper it, make you more aerodynamic. And I know you didn't come here to hear that, but when it's worth 3 k's an hour at cruising speed, I think that's important. Now, part of it is down to tyre choice. Gravel tyres typically prioritise lower rolling resistance over outright grip, but then a big chunk comes down to the geometry, more nimble handling, but also lower handlebars. So on the Topstone range, the stack height of the bikes is the same whether you've got the rigid fork or this lefty Oliver suspension fork. However, on the lefty Ocho fork on the rather lovely looking FSI XC mountain bikes, that puts the stack height of the bike 5 centimeters higher. That's like turning my road bike into Grandad's touring bike. In contrast, the stack height on this Topstone Carbon Lefty is just 5mm higher than on the Super 6 road bike. So far so good then, but what about the drawbacks? Well, suspension is more complicated, at least compared to an equivalent straight carbon tube, and there's also a bit of a weight penalty. Not much, but a bit. You've got obviously a few grams from that pivot at the back here, and then also about 800 grams from the fork. And it's got to be said, one of the real appeals of gravel bikes is their simplicity and low weight compared to mountain bikes. Although, some of you will undoubtedly point out that some cross-country mountain bikes can be ridiculously light, and yes, you would be correct in that. Now, the other thing is that suspension can be quite expensive. There is a huge amount of engineering that goes into this setup, not to mention the hardware as well. So for an entry-level gravel bike, a rigid bike will give you much more for your money. As I mentioned earlier, you can get a bit of extra suspension from the tyres. So if the bike allows it, you could simply fit fatter rubber. Now that's not without its drawbacks, but it's certainly a cheaper and simpler alternative. So is suspension the future of gravel bikes then? Well, yes, but not the only future of gravel bikes. But I think for riders who are using gravel bikes as a means of escaping traffic and for a nice relaxing ride, perhaps on one of the Neo e-bike versions, then the additional comfort from suspension is going to make sense. And for people who are out for really long distances on bumpy and sometimes rough gravel roads, the additional comfort and speed is going to make sense. Plus, you'll still get the benefits of a gravel bike and the feel of a gravel bike compared to a mountain bike. And then for those riders that are out looking to push the boundaries of gravel bikes into mountain bike territory, it definitely makes sense as well, because you've got more control, you can go faster, you don't have to worry quite so much about rocks basically, which are ironically still a gravel bike's worst enemy. However, for many people, one of the reasons why gravel bikes are so cool is because they're like road bikes on steroids. And so a rigid, lightweight and simple machine is always going to play a big part in the gravel spectrum. Ultimately though, I think that the tide will turn in favour of suspension on gravel bikes when pro gravel racers realise the benefits of it. Just like the same thing happened in mountain biking back in the day. However, please don't confuse a suspension gravel bike for a short travel XC mountain bike. The bulk of the DNA for this comes from the road. Now, as ever, I would be very interested to hear your thoughts on this. In fact, more than ever, this is a particularly contentious topic, so please get involved in the comments section down below, and also give this video a big thumbs up if you've enjoyed it.